The internet is a great place for connecting with other fans of things you like, and my YouTube channel is where I usually dive into deep discussions about Godzilla films, mainly the filmmaking of said movies. I often ask my viewers for video suggestions, and for a while, I kept getting bombarded with requests to do power scaling videos. Those exhausting who would win debates about which kaiju is stronger than another. Some people even wanted me to add power scaling sections to my Godzilla retrospective videos, but I've always shut that down, usually with troll replies like, I don't want to do who would win videos because that's the kind of things that kids argue about at recess. For me, power scaling sucks the fun out of appreciating these movies. What starts as a harmless thought experiment quickly turns into a vortex of pointless arguments that drain all the joy from fandom and warp how people engage with art. I've seen firsthand how easily it derails conversations. When I think about why I love Godzilla, it's not because I'm sitting there crunching numbers on how many megashits per terafarts his atomic breath could destroy. It's because these films are weird, messy, and full of raw creativity. Movies about smashing models together, reflecting cultural fears, and bringing bizarre creatures to life. Power scaling strips all of that away. It turns something expressive and mythic into a spreadsheet of stats and meaningless calculations. And that's why I hate it, because it reduces something soulful, like art, to something sterile, like endless debates and discussions that feel more at home with sports. End of video. You can click off now. Leave your hate comment. Bye. God damn it. This video is going to get me into so much shit. Let's do it. I've also seen these debates spiral into absolute chaos. What starts as casual fun quickly mutates into weirdly intense battles, with people treating fictional monster stats like they're debating real-world sports teams. Like, you'd swear that r/power scaling was just the online version of ESPN's First Take with Stephen A. Smith.
His very first move as the executive was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack!
Because it's not really about who's stronger anymore, it's about proving who understands the lore better, who can analyze feats more accurately, and who can flex their knowledge the hardest. It is exhausting, and personally, I'd rather use my time and brain power discussing filmmaking techniques, themes, and the weirder artistic elements of the genre. Things that are tangible. But let's take a big step back. What even is power scaling? I assume most of you watching this know, but for the few who don't, let's break it down. Power scaling is the practice of comparing the capabilities of fictional characters to determine the outcome of a hypothetical fight. This usually involves analyzing attack power, durability, speed, intelligence, special abilities or hacks, and equipment. Power scalers break down feats, which are the on-screen demonstrations of power, and statements, which are in-universe claims or lore material to build a hierarchy of evidence. Supposedly, narrative context is the most reliable factor, followed by feats, then statements, and finally outside materials like data books or interviews. The idea is to quantify fictional strength, creating a ranking system that allows for cross-series comparisons. But here's the thing. Once you start applying that level of analysis, these stories stop being stories. They become equations. There's something deeply off-putting and anti-art to me about trying to quantify the strength of a monster that's meant to be symbolic or mythic. Godzilla is not a set of stats. He's a metaphor for nuclear devastation, or a metaphor for guilt, or whatever the fuck Godzilla vs. Megalon was. When you reduce him to just numbers and feats, you flatten him into something dull and mechanical. There's nothing interesting about him then. And sure, some people do find that kind of analysis fun, and I guess if you think that, wonderful. But to me, it strips away the ambiguity and mystery that make these films compelling in the first place. When I watch Shin Godzilla, I don't need to know the exact energy output of his atomic breath. I just need to feel the horror of it. When I watch Final Wars, I don't need to compare power levels to enjoy how over-the-top and insane it is. Not everything in fiction needs to be quantified. Sometimes the fun is in the uncertainty, the spectacle, and the personal interpretation of it. After all, isn't that what movies are for? I can make a whole different video about ending explained videos and how I hate those too, but power scaling to me is very reminiscent of that. Again, it's anti-art. Now, I've seen a lot of pushback towards my stance on this issue, which, at this point, I'm completely used to. I've seen a ton of arguments against what I've said in the past, so I hope this video acts as both a response to that and as a litmus test to see who actually watched this video and who just saw the title and thumbnail, got mad, and immediately started writing out a yap fest in the comments about why I'm wrong, I'm fat, and I'm gay. I don't know. I've seen some people argue that power scaling helps maintain consistency in storytelling and prevents illogical power creep. But let's be real. Most of the time, that's not what's happening. The vast majority of discourse that I've seen firsthand is just not that. Instead, it's people arguing over which character is stronger, and that's it. This mindset tends to be most prevalent in action-driven series, especially in anime, where power progression is a key theme. Look no further than series like One Punch Man or Dragon Ball Z, where there's been a constant debate as to whether Anime Man A or Anime Man B is stronger than the other. Another common defense is that power scaling can actually enhance appreciation for characters by showing how they overcome stronger opponents. But here's the issue I have with that. Appreciation doesn't have to come from knowing the exact strength of an attack or how many tons a monster can lift. The appeal of Godzilla or any kaiju isn't about raw power rankings. It's about their presence, their themes, and cinematic impact. I can love Gamera's scrappiness without needing a numerical breakdown of how he defeated Legion. I can appreciate Showa Godzilla's strength without having to compare his durability to Heisei Godzilla's. Power scaling doesn't necessarily add to these elements. It just redirects the conversation away from them. Then there are the more extreme technical methods, like pixel scaling, where people measure attack size based on visuals and real-world physics calculations applied to fictional scenarios. These methods are laughably unreliable because fiction doesn't work like reality. Artistic liberties exist. Filmmaking techniques exist. Trying to apply hard math to a movie where a guy in a rubber suit kicks over a building is just missing the point. And that is the core issue. Power scaling pretends to be objective, but it's built on subjective interpretation. At the end of the day, in fiction, the writer decides who wins. No matter how much math you throw at it, a creator can just say, yeah, but this character wins. As long as it suits the story, that's fine by me. So, all this analysis ultimately means nothing. The reliance on feats and statements disguises the fact that none of this is set in stone, and that leads to endless, pointless debates that I'm personally sick of seeing. And now we get to talk about the T word, toxicity. Toxicity is a huge part of power scaling. Like, you have to admit that. Even if you are a hardcore power scaler defender, that is just a part of it. And it comes from people just taking it way too seriously. Fanboyism runs rampant, with people developing irrational attachments to their favorite characters and refusing to accept anything that suggests that their favorite character isn't the strongest to ever exist. This leads to biased interpretations, outright misinformation, and endless character wanking, which is inflating a character's abilities beyond reason, and the internet only makes it worse. Anonymity and the lack of real consequences encourage aggressive, combative behavior. Gatekeeping becomes a problem, with certain fans trying to dictate who counts as a real fan, based on whether they adhere to specific power scaling interpretations. I have been called a fake Godzilla fan because I don't care about power scaling. That's real. I know. I don't get it. What could be harmless, fun discussions often devolve into personal attacks, insults, and exhausting toxicity. And maybe that's why I find it so frustrating, because when I look at these arguments, it's like watching people fight over the dumbest shit. It's not about appreciating great scenes or talking about why you love these movies, something that could unite everyone. I mean, everyone loves a good movie, especially one that, they're in the fandom for. But instead, these arguments are more about proving someone else wrong. And I get that fandom can be competitive, but when it turns into nitpicking over who can lift a bigger rock, it's like, what are you doing? Like, go outside, It misses the point of why we love these stories in the first place. And I'm not saying you're consuming art the wrong way, but to me, this ultimately seems like immature arguments that you would hear from school children on a playground, and not adults demanding to be taken seriously. Some might argue if you don't like power scaling, just ignore it, but the problem is that it does affect the broader fandom to the point where you outright can't ignore it. I wish I could ignore it, I really do, but power scaling unfortunately shapes the way people talk about kaiju, how they engage with movies, and even what kind of discussions get prioritized. Just go to r/Godzilla. Like, you're going to find weird fake posts about me being dead. I don't know why there was a death hoax. That was bizarre. But you would also find tons of power scaling discussions, which it's like, I wish there was a separate subreddit for that. You know, like, I wish I could just focus on the movies here, but whatever. If every conversation about Godzilla versus Kong just evolves into who is stronger instead of discussing the actual movie itself, it changes how the fandom interacts with the series as a whole. Ignoring power scaling doesn't stop it from influencing discourse. If anything, it only makes the toxicity worse since no one is calling it out. The internet is rife with examples of power scaling debates spiraling into toxic outbursts. Common behaviors include the use of insults and derogatory terms like goon, dumbass, and yeah, I could go on, but I kind of like having a YouTube channel. Certain matchups like Orange Guy from Dragon Ball versus Bald Guy from One Punch Man have become notorious for generating intense and often toxic arguments. Extreme reactions, including instances of death threats, have been reported in particularly heated debates. A recurring theme is the insistence that one's personal opinion on a character's power level is an objective fact, with any disagreement met with hostility. This can lead to the creation of non-canonical arguments and the deliberate dismissal of evidence from the source material to support a desired outcome. The assertion that a particular character can defeat all others, or soloing entire verses, is another common and often baseless claim that fuels toxic discussions and nothing more. Within these debates, thought-terminating arguments and logical fallacies that shut down meaningful discussion are frequently employed. Specific fandoms have developed reputations for their power-scaling toxicity. The Dragon Ball fandom, one that I'm not a part of, I don't really know much about the show beyond it's over 9,000, has a very long history and explicit, though often inconsistent, power levels. And these have been long-standing sources of such issues. More recently, the One Punch Man fandom has also seen a rise in toxicity, mainly surrounding the seemingly limitless power of its protagonist, the bald guy. And to me, it's like, I just feel like you're missing the point, you know? Like, isn't the point of that show that he is so powerful that he almost has, like, an existential crisis? He's just bored as hell existing because nothing in life excites him anymore? Like, why are you more focused on, like, the fighting when, like, even the main character isn't? You know? Other fandoms frequently cited for toxic power scaling debates include those centered around Naruto, Bleach, Marvel Comics, and DC Comics. The existence of dedicated online communities on platforms like Reddit, and the power scaling subreddit highlight the prevalence of this very activity. While some participants do engage with genuine attempts at analysis and debate, these spaces are ultimately echo chambers. All you're going to get are biased opinions and hotbeds of toxic behavior featuring bizarre and often nonsensical arguments. Even the Godzilla fandom is not immune to this. Given that the franchise is literally about giant monsters fighting, it makes sense that fans would argue about which kaiju is the strongest. But the problem is when these debates become more about proving superiority over your favorite monster than actually enjoying the movies. One of the biggest points of contention, I feel like everyone already is like waiting for me to talk about it, is the Godzilla vs. Kong discourse, where some fans absolutely refuse to acknowledge that Kong played a role in saving Godzilla from Mechagodzilla at the end of Godzilla vs. Kong. Take a shot every time I say Godzilla, you'll be dead by the end of this video, I promise. There's also endless bickering over which version of Godzilla is the most powerful, whether that be MonsterVerse Godzilla, Showa Godzilla, Godzilla Earth, and let's not forget the bizarre tendency for some fans to downplay every other kaiju just to make Godzilla seem untouchable. What frustrates me is when power scaling erases what makes these movies interesting. Take Godzilla vs. Biollante. It's not a movie about who hits harder, it's about the weird, tragic beauty of Biollante's design, the existential horror of DNA experiments gone wrong. But in a power scaling conversation, it ends up getting reduced to, well, Biollante isn't as strong as Heisei Ghidorah, so she's irrelevant. It's flattening art into numbers. And I get it. Some fans enjoy the hypothetical fights, but when that becomes the primary conversation, it feels like we're missing out. We're reducing something strange and emotional into a math problem, and that doesn't feel like a win to me. I don't want to go on some moral crusade against power scaling. If it's your thing, enjoy it. But for me, I'm more interested in what these movies say, how they make me feel, and why they're still compelling after all these years. That's the kind of conversation that I'd rather have. I recently made a community poll on my channel where I asked the following question: what are your thoughts on power scaling? I've made my opinion on it very clear, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. Sound off in the comments. And the response was an overwhelming 68% stating they disliked power scaling, while only 32% liked power scaling. Here are some of the top comments from that post, and very friendly reminder that if you'd like to be featured in one of these videos, subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for community posts just like these. One commenter, Indominus Gojira, stated, I enjoy who would win discussions, but I think too many people ruin the fun and take it too seriously. Meanwhile, on the more positive side, YouTube user DPB Edits stated, I enjoy it, prefer just using feats and statements, but otherwise it's alright. It just gets mad annoying when people who can't scale for shit come into the discussion and say, oh, he's boundless. While Goji Gav 2002 commented, I love power scaling, but some people in the Godzilla community ignore statements and glaze other monsters just so that their side can win. Finally, another user, Itchy Bones, commented the following. Every who would win scenario depends on the person who's writing up the scenario. If either character wins, it will be based on the opinion of the person writing it, as well as how complex they make the fight. For example, it's obvious that Godzilla has a weapon that will easily kill Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong, but because of the director, the fight lasted longer. He could have even made Kong win. It would have been up to him. Taking all of this into consideration when talking about power scaling, if both characters have the ability to kill each other in different scenarios, it's up to the individual to decide who would win, no matter how crazy it may seem to others. Personally, I think Itchy Bones makes a pretty good argument here, and that brings me to my next point, and it starts with a quote from the legendary comic book writer Stan Lee. When asked about hypothetical battles between his creations, Lee famously stated, who would win in a fight if Galactus fought the Hulk, or if Thor fought Iron Man? And there's one answer to all of that. It's so simple. Anyone should know this. The person who'd win in a fight is the person that the scriptwriter wants to win. That's it. That's the whole truth. These characters don't have fixed power levels. They have whatever strength the story needs them to have. Spider-Man could beat the Thing if the writer wants him to. It's fiction. There's no definitive answer. And that's why power scaling as a concept is inherently flawed, because it ignores the fundamental nature of storytelling. Beyond that, power scaling's obsession with stats and hypothetical fights really just sucks the joy out of fiction. When every discussion becomes about measuring power scales, people stop appreciating the actual artistry of the work. Great characters and moments get dismissed just because they're not the strongest. People decide a movie sucks because Godzilla lost a fight that he should have won, and feats get ripped out of context, leading to absurd conclusions. It turns storytelling into a rigid numbers game, when in reality, storytelling thrives on unpredictability and creative choices. For instance, a viewer might deem a movie sucks because Godzilla, typically portrayed as immensely powerful, was defeated by an opponent who, according to power scaling metrics, should have been inferior. This reaction ignores the potential for clever strategy, environmental factors, or narrative contrivances that the writer employed to create a compelling story. Furthermore, power scaling often involves stripping feats and statements from their original context. A single impressive feat might be taken as an absolute measure of a character's power, ignoring instances where they are portrayed as significantly weaker or the specific circumstances that allowed for that exceptional display. Ultimately, the outcome of many fictional fights is dictated by the needs of the plot. That's literally how storytelling works. An overemphasis on power scaling leads to a less engaging and honestly, a more predictable experience of fiction. When fans become overly fixated on predetermined hierarchies of strength, the potential for unexpected outcomes and the element of surprise, which are very important in storytelling, are diminished. They don't exist. While I do have my own problems with power scaling, especially ones that I've mentioned so far, I do think that it is important to acknowledge some counter-arguments and the notion that, for some, it can be a harmless form of entertainment, which is entirely fair. For some people, power scaling is a lighthearted hobby, a way to connect with friends and fellow fans, and a form of imaginative play through what-if scenarios. I've said it before and I'll say it again here. I do not take issue with normal individuals casually enjoying this activity if it brings them pleasure, even if I don't like it myself. If you're a normal person, you like power scaling, then hell yeah, dude, keep at it. Just keep it away from me and my channel. That's all I ask. However, the crucial point is where this seemingly harmless fun transforms into toxicity, when it encroaches upon other aspects of fandom and affects personal interests. Even if some people engage in power scaling without malice, the broader culture surrounding it still fosters an environment that is toxic and exclusionary. Another argument that I've heard get thrown around in favor of power scaling is that it's a tool for identifying inconsistencies in a story's power levels and character abilities. And I disagree. I think that while acknowledging that consistency can be a desirable element in storytelling, an excessive focus on a rigid power scale leads to unproductive nitpicking and a failure to appreciate the artistic license and fluidity inherent in creative works. As Stan Lee's quote emphasizes, writers prioritize the narrative, and apparent inconsistencies can often be attributed to the needs of the story rather than errors in some objective power scaling. Don't get me wrong though, if a Porg beat Luke Skywalker in a fight, then yeah, that's stupid, but when you break down fictional abilities to the point of staring at pixels on a screen and then getting mad at something that no normal person cares about, then we have a problem. Ultimately, analyzing a story through the lens of thematic consistency and character arcs has the potential of giving the viewer a much more enriching and insightful experience than obsessing over the precise quantification of power levels. To me, that just seems like a downright weird way to consume media, and it comes off as being very, very anti-art. At the end of the day, I care about what these movies mean, not how high a character ranks on an imaginary tier list. And based on the overwhelming response from my community, I know that I'm not alone in that. At the end of the day, the monsters in these movies don't care who's stronger. They're here to destroy buildings, to roar, and to sometimes dropkick each other across a field. Maybe we should do the same thing. Metaphorically, of course. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. This is a very long video that's been in the works for a while, and I just had a lot that I really wanted to say and kind of get off my chest. If you disagree, I'm sure there's going to be a very big group of people that will disagree with this video, which is fine. I don't care. Feel free to leave a comment. Just be respectful, you know. I was respectful to you. I would hope that you would kind of do the same thing to me. Anyways, consider becoming a member to support the channel. It's kind of like Patreon, but it's right here on YouTube. For $1.99 a month, you'll receive member shoutouts, your name featured as an executive producer in all of our film projects, and there's going to be some members-only videos that are up on the channel right now. You also get members first videos, so before this video was made public, it was members first. There's also a $50 tier where you can basically have me make any video that you want within reason. I do have some stipulations. They have to kind of fit with the general vibe of the channel. You know, I'm not going to do political videos because someone's paying me to. But if you want more information on that, go to the membership tab on the channel and check it out. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.